Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to Message in the Middle. I'm your host, Marianne, and today I'm having a conversation with Dr. Carrie Holland. Dr. Holland is a board-certified family physician with additional certifications in personal training and health and life coaching. She's the CEO of her full-time life coaching practice, where she helps smart women build strong habits around eating, moving, and thinking. Using habit psychology, mindset management tools, and her own nutrition and exercise expertise, Dr. Holland helps overstretched, high-achieving working women prioritize themselves and feel better. She's also the host of the weekly podcast, Strong as a Mindset. Dr. Holland, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. Thank you.
So I think your story, your backstory will be very familiar with my listeners. And I'd love it if you could share a little bit of the highlights of what was going on in your life and what really caused you to take a look and move from being a physician, which we all think of as this, glorious, high-paying, prestigious role, to a full-time life coach, which I think you admittedly would say people have different opinions on.
Oh, yes.
So talk to us a little bit about that shift, because it's a really big shift.
Sure.
What got you there?
I will be honest, it was kind of piecemeal. But honestly, it was through coaching and therapy that I was able to make some important realizations about my trajectory. So I realized that medicine really was my escape. And I can explain that a little better. It really was my way out of my family. My childhood, I don't know how else to describe it other than to say it was pretty unpleasant. My parents, they're still married, but they fight a lot. They fought a lot growing up. And so my answer to all of this was to study really hard. That was my escape. And so I studied really hard, and I decided that I just needed out. And I was good at math. I was good at science. I got good grades. And so the natural answer was, okay, go to medical school. So I did. And the same skills that got me to medical school, pushing really hard, also caused me to become completely fried. I mean, you could ask me, I'm sure many of your listeners can relate. Like, you could ask me to do anything and I would do it, and I would get you an A+, hands down. And I just thought that if I kept grinding and kept going, that eventually my financial planner would say, hey, you can retire now and all would be good. But that did not work, and things continued to worsen. And ultimately, there was no aha moment, but things got worse between my parents. We are now estranged. We haven't spoken in over 10 years, and it's been a bit of a mess. But all of these things combined, along with a career that was what I thought I wanted, made me do some serious hard look at myself, and I just was not happy. And I was tired of being numb, quite frankly. I mean, I don't know if you can relate, but sometimes we just get into this place where it's like you just keep going and grinding and going and going, and a lot of action with very little thinking. And I did. I felt like a machine, and I felt numb. And I frankly just got tired of myself and decided that I need to do something different. But medicine trains you to do exactly one thing, and that is see patients. So it was with the help of my own coach. I had been introduced to coaching. I'd also done lots of therapy, spent lots of money on therapy because it was worth it. But with that, the combination of those two things, I was able to make the realization that medicine was my escape, and that it's okay to make a change, to pivot. I know that's a buzzword now, but I did. I pivoted. And to your point, I really did have to confront some of the realities of opinions about physicians who leave clinical medicine, but also physicians who become coaches, because there are very strong opinions about both. So I frankly had to get over myself and have my own back and decide that this is really what is right for me. And I truly do believe that this is exactly where I belong. I have had the opportunity to coach so many women in various, I don't just coach physicians, I coach everybody. So I've gotten the chance to work with so many women, and hearing their stories, there's a unifying theme among them. They have taken care of everything and everybody at the expense of taking care of themselves. And now I get to help them fix that So along the way, what I've realized is that even though I no longer practice medicine, I'm still helping people. And now what I'm doing is helping the women who are helping all the other people. And so if I can impart skills and concepts and tools and mindset concepts that will help them help themselves and therefore help the other people in their lives, that is what I'm set out to do. So again, it's taken years to figure that out. But I'm so grateful that I did, because it's allowed me to do things like this. It's allowed me to speak on stage. It's allowed me to create my own podcast and have my own message. So yeah, but it was very piecemeal. I started out personal training. I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew I needed a hobby. So I started out personal training clients at the Y and slowly built on from there. So
I love that.
I definitely did not know what it was going to end up being. But again, with some time and trial and error and willingness to fail, I've landed here. So yeah.
There's so many things I want to grab out of that. But first thing I want to say is I can totally relate. Yes, not a physician, but I too got very sucked into the, trying to be perfect and trying to excel in corporate America for 25 plus years. And it was also my place to hide when life was getting sucky and stuff wasn't quite right at home because of various things. Life happens. Mm-hmm. I just dug deeper, dug harder, right? So I totally get it. And I think many of the listeners can as well. The second thing I want to pull out is I just did an episode with Dr. Rob Kelly. He's an addiction and recovery expert. And he talks about how everyone has childhood trauma and how our childhood trauma really does impact what we do in life, how we, operate in the world as adults. And a key to getting healthy in our mind is going back and recognizing what that childhood trauma was and really being able to sort of reframe things, which you've done. So I just want to call that out for people. And the last thing is the fact that you said you started as a trainer at the Y and didn't really know the end result. I love that, because I often talk about how we get so hung up in trying to know all the steps, being scared to start because we don't know what the whole picture would look like, or being so tied to the end result and the outcome that we get in our own way. And sometimes we even miss out on really great opportunities. Yeah. And you didn't do that. You took the step, scary, I'm sure. We're going to talk about that, but you took it anyway, and it's led you here. So I want to applaud you for doing all that. That's brave. It takes a lot to be able to do that and to roll with it.
Well, thank you. And honestly, I think it just took getting really tired of it and just hitting that tipping point of enough is enough. And it took me years to finally do that, but I'm so glad I did, because the exhaustion of inaction and overthinking is real. Yeah. And it feels like you're expending so much energy thinking about it, but you have nothing to show for it. There's nothing that's been done. And so instead of leaving it stuck in my brain, swirling, I did. I mean, again, it was the why. This wasn't fancy, but it was just one teeny weeny step forward. And I realized there's something else here. I enjoyed the personal training, but that wasn't it. And so clients started asking about okay, how do I eat to build muscle? And I was like, I don't know. Unfortunately, I never learned that in medical school, which is really sad. But that led me to a health coach certification. And so then I did those things. And so I became a health coach. And then I was coaching clients and realized, wow, they're having a really hard time following through on these plans. Why? What's going on here? And then I realized oh, it's our mindset. It's all of the limiting beliefs. It's the perfectionism. Yeah. It's the fear of failure. Yeah. All of these things that you're bringing up, right? That is it. And so then I realized, oh, okay, how can I help these clients do this? Yeah. Through life coaching. I mean, because life coaching really is a partnership in which I help clients set and achieve goals. There it is. I was able to learn the skills that I needed to give to them and also take and use for myself to move forward. Yeah. So it was only by taking those small actions and realizing okay, this is where I need to backfill, that I was able to move forward. And again, it felt really good to take that action and see okay, when you take that action, the next steps will reveal themselves to you versus, again, swimming in your brain where nothing is happening and you don't know what to do because you haven't done anything.
Yes.
So if anyone can learn from my mistake, that's it. It's to take the smallest of steps. It doesn't matter what it is. Tiny is fine because it will move you somewhere. And that's all we need to get started.
The other thing, you alluded to it. You did that whole cycle of sort of discovery with curiosity leading. So it was what can I do next? How can I help with them? Why is this going on? I didn't hear any judgment in any of that around you or the people you're working with. It was let me figure out more. What else can I get from it? And I think having that mindset of curiosity. I hear that so much, and I've seen it in my own life. If we can train ourselves to do that, to sort of be the little detectives with everything we're doing, you learn so much. And I think you shut the judgment off when you're in that phase.
Yeah.
You alluded to it, so I just wanted to call that out. So let's dig in just a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
You've been doing this coaching now, and you've worked with many, many women. Tell me why you think, or what you've observed around why all of the responsibilities we as women have, they tend to get in the way of our own wellness. I know you feel strongly about that. Talk to us a little bit about what you have observed and where you think that really gets the most contention.
Oh, yes. I mean, I think what I've seen play out so often is that, I mean, I said it before, but many of the women that I work with, most of the women that I work with did not get where they are by going easy.
Yeah.
Right. Like most of these women did not get C pluses in high school and college. Like they are used to doing well, and they are used to doing beyond well. And so then enter graduate school, career, kids, family, and there becomes more and more balls to juggle. And it becomes this constant balancing act of, okay, I have these things that I need to take care of at work. And then I also have these people at home or these people in my life that I need to take care of. And then what happens is that we end up on the back burner. And I think part of that is shades of perfectionism, shades of overachieving, self-induced pressure, but then also the very real cultural expectation of what women in our world should do. I mean, we have been taught to put everyone and everyone else's needs and wants before our own, and that all comes at a cost. So there's some unlearning to do. And I would also add that, I mean, one of the big things that I do in my work is help women process their feelings. And one of the feelings that comes up all the time is guilt. And it's guilt either way. It's guilt by leaving work early to go to a kid's soccer game. It's guilt leaving your coworkers strapped while you go do something else. It's guilt of leaving your kids because you have to go in for an emergency work meeting. And there's guilt either way. And so I really work with them to process that guilt and allow it, because I think that there are some major paradigm shifts that need to happen in our world before that guilt is non-existent. And until that magical time happens, I think that we as women need to learn how to manage and process that guilt, but still make decisions, whether that means choosing career at some points or choosing family at some points, because there are points in our lives when our career needs us more. There are points in our lives when our family needs us more. And we need to be able to give ourselves permission to make those choices, but they're not without consequence. And inevitably the guilt comes on. And so it's this big circle. So if I can help them pull that apart and manage to feel the guilt anyway, then we're on to something. And I will say this to everybody that I work with and anybody who will listen, because the more negative emotion you are willing to experience, including guilt, the more negative emotion you are willing to experience, the more success you will have in your life. And that is true for fitness, career, relationship, all of it. But that's a hard sell. I'm not going to lie, because we don't like to feel negative emotion, but that's where the work is. So,
well, and you also said, you said it before about being numb. I think we get caught up in all of these things, and we're so buried in just life and all the responsibilities, and we're so numb. I think we don't even realize we're not feeling any feelings. And that's when you start to kind of awaken to this stuff and start really looking back and trying to unlearn some of the patterns, you can recognize that you weren't feeling happy, you weren't feeling joy, but you really weren't feeling the negative side either. You just weren't feeling, you were just numb. And I think that a lot of people go through that.
yeah.
So I've heard you say that you can be at your ideal weight, the weight the book tells you to be at. You can be fit, very strong body, body-wise, built, whatever. But unless you're managing your mind, you're not really well. I see you smile. So you feel that.
100%.
Talk to us about that, because I don't, I think, and I'm sure you've seen this, trying to get people to recognize that mindset is really most of the battle with all of these things. It's a hard sell too. So how does that show up for you in your practice?
Ooh, lots of ways. And it comes from all angles, regardless of honestly, whether the client is overweight, underweight, normal weight, whatever their BMI says, which we know BMI is not the best measure of weight anyway in health. But I mean, I say it all the time, and I'll say it here because I learned from my own mistake, but I really do believe it, that you can be the most jacked, fit person in the room, but if you are not taking care of your brain, you do not have true wellness. And oftentimes we use exercise and nutrition as a coping mechanism, or we often put that in a place where it's easier in some ways to do those things, right? It's easier to cut out all carbs. It's easier to go subject yourself to another HIIT session, even if you hate HIIT. It's easier to do all of those things than it is to go in and clean up your brain and get into the limiting beliefs and thoughts about yourself that have been keeping you stuck for decades. Even though none of those are easy, I'm not going to lie, right? Like none of those are easy, but the eating and the moving tend to be a lot easier than thinking. For exactly what you said, we're numb, right? It's a lot easier to go and try to inject exercise and diet into our lives than it is to pull apart our belief systems. And so where I really try to help the people that I work with is really all three of those things, right? But under the umbrella of thinking first. I mean, you cannot beat yourself up into your next best version. And so many of the women that I work with come at it from that space. If I just, you said it earlier, it's like if I just push a little harder, if I just go a little harder when things aren't going right, if I'm not losing weight or if I'm not growing muscle the way I want, I'm just going to push just a little harder. But often that place, that pushing is coming from a place of self-loathing, and that doesn't move us anywhere. And so in order to push and actually get to our next best version, that push has to come from a place of self-love and self-kindness and self-compassion. And that's often where many people turn off because they just haven't learned how to do that. I mean, I know I didn't. I had no idea. Even the word, I say it like self-compassion. Yes, it makes me cringe. I'm just like, ugh. But it's so important. And so now I just say, like, you have to be kind to yourself. You just have to be nice to yourself. Stop judging yourself. Think about the self-talk that's going on in your brain. And would you utter that aloud to another person in your life? And most times the answer is hell no. So that tells me that we have work to do and that we have to clean up both your brain and your attitude towards exercising and nutrition in order for everything to line up. It all has to line up. If you're going to go through all of the work of changing the way that you eat and you move, you have to change the way that you think, because otherwise those changes are going to be temporary at best. So it's all three of them. I mean, again, if you engage with any of my content, it always comes back to those three things, with the umbrella being thinking. You have to have a clean, managed mind first in order for these things to really take in and take hold and have a lasting impact. So they really do all intersect.
So what's your best advice for helping people let go of those old stories? Because all of those old stories that we carried with us, that's what the negative thoughts are. That's the circle that kind of keeps pulling us back in. So what have you learned, or what have you seen yourself or with the clients that you're working with? Where are people having the most success at getting past them, letting them go?
I'm going to use your word, get curious. I mean, really, that's it. The whole process of changing, I call it practicing thinking. We're changing how we're thinking about ourselves. And it starts by getting curious and asking curious questions. So with any limiting belief, you could even take the belief of, I don't have time to exercise. That's one I hear very often. And so we'll get curious about it and just ask some questions. Is it true? Is it really true? Right? Because often the things that we tell ourselves, because we think them, we think they are true. We think they are fact. But again, our truth is not the same as the truth. And in order to be willing to pull that apart, we have to be willing to see that difference, right?
Yeah.
So when somebody tells me I have no time to exercise, again, we're just getting curious here. Is that the absolute truth? And most often the answer is no, but we have to be willing to look for it, right? So is it true? Is it kind? Most often, no, right? Like most often the limiting beliefs that we have about ourselves, they're just not very nice, right? And is it helpful? And most often, again, limiting beliefs are limiting for a reason. They don't move us forward. So that's my first question. And it's actually 3 questions in one, but it's kind of, we're breaking the ice here. Is it true? Is it kind? Is it helpful? Then this is where it gets more fun. Then we start to look at, is there any evidence that the opposite might be true, right? So we're going to take your limiting belief and now we're going to try to prove ourselves wrong, which again, also a hard sell, because most of us just do not like to be wrong. And we especially do not like to be wrong about ourselves, right? So we have to really dive in there and look at what else might be true. So is it really true that you have no time to exercise? No. What else might be true? Maybe I could get up 5 minutes earlier and do some simple stretches before I go to work. Maybe I could take a short walk around my block before I sit down to dinner. Maybe instead of sitting on the couch in front of the TV, I do some sort of app exercise, whatever, right? Like again, and And the point here is that you will find solutions if you look for them. It's thinking in terms of possibility. Oftentimes when clients start to work with me, they tell me all the things they can't do and all the nevers and no way, and there is just no possibility. We have to turn that on its head. And so it means that we have to start thinking in terms of what is possible. And that means looking for solutions, and it means going counter to what you might have believed for years. So that's just the start of it. So is it true? Is it kind? Is it helpful? Is there any evidence that the opposite might be true? And then what's underneath the thought? Right? Because often, I mean, think of it as an iceberg. I don't have time to exercise. That's often an iceberg thought, like what's underneath it. And that's where we really have to start to pull the thread. And that's often where the limiting beliefs really start to come up, because I don't have time to exercise. Again, I think of that as a surface level, and I'm almost always, there's more underneath it. And it's things like, I don't want to uproot my family's life and routine by asking for time to exercise. I feel guilty taking time to exercise. I don't know how to rearrange my work schedule in order to fit in more time for me. Those, as an example, because those come up all the time, those are a much, much different problem than I don't have time to exercise, right? But those underneath the iceberg questions, those are the ones that we really need to dive into in order to really pull it apart and see what else is possible.
That's really great practical advice. And that's a great example, because getting to that next layer and starting to dig there. And of course, there's a layer below that as well. But
right? Yeah.
It really starts to peel it back, and you can start to have more clarity around it. And I love the idea of just reframing things too. Like, what could you do? Reframe your thoughts to the positive, because that is a practice that we don't do by default.
Yeah.
So.
And I would simply add to your point, like saying, like, looking to the positive, this is not the same. I mean, I am way too snarky and sarcastic to be toxically positive. Like there's, again, toxic positivity is definitely out there. It's a thing.
Yeah.
This is not about like rainbows and butterflies and like cotton candy to like make time for exercise. There's both things here. There's the duality of it. Like we have to acknowledge that you're busy. Like I don't know a single person that I work with. I don't know probably a single person listening that isn't busy, right?
Yeah.
So there's the acknowledgement of that and the acceptance of that. But then there's also, how do we move forward? Knowing that you're busy and knowing that you have this goal or this thing that you're trying to do or this change to your life that you're trying to make. Okay, how do we move forward? So I don't ever want to ignore whatever it is, because whatever it is causing you to think you're busy, it's true, right?
Yes.
But we also need to decide, okay, what are we going to do with that? Because are we going to let that keep you miserably stuck? I call it miserable comfort, staying stuck right where you are in the same belief patterns that keep you miserably stuck. Or do we stretch a little bit and go somewhere else that moves you forward? So it's both. So I never claim to be toxically positive, because that just doesn't roll with me. So I just wanted to put that out there.
No, I like that. I like that clarification. And your word was the possibility, right? Versus I can't, it's looking for the possibility. And I love that. So that's really a good point. I want to switch gears a tiny bit and talk about strength training, because I know, it's something you talk about, and it's something that through many guests I've been trying to highlight, especially middle-aged women as we're starting to age. The importance of staying strong is important to our independence as we grow older. Talk to me a little bit about ways that people can get started, and how you see it show up as being important to people and what it does for them.
Well, oh my gosh. I mean, I honestly think that every person on this earth could benefit from strength training, and there is no time that's too late to start. Like I don't care how old you are, you can start today. It doesn't matter. And there's always something that you can do. I think when we say the words strength training, it often like conjures up images of like Gold's Gym and men and like, the shirts and the chains and the whatevers. But it doesn't have to be that way. So you can get started strength training at home. And if anything that came from the pandemic, it taught us that. So it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to take a lot of hours. And I always say these, and I'll share them here, but there are 5 key foundational exercises that I would want every person to know how to do. And I'll explain why in a second. But those exercises are squats, deadlifts, bench press or chest press, rows or pull-ups, and overhead shoulder presses. So 5 key moves. And again, you can find them I mean, I can direct you to where to find those. They're easy to find and easy to find like how to do properly. But the reason those 5 are important is because they're compound multi-joint moves that in combination will hit nearly every single muscle group in your body. And more importantly, they are functional. So if you think about reaching overhead into a cupboard, that's an overhead shoulder press. If you think about pulling a door open, that's a row. If you think about squatting down to pick up a suitcase, that's a squat, right? Like all of these things. So they're all functional moves that we need to hang on to as we get older. So it's not just that these are great for building muscle, they are, but they're also functional moves that will allow you to do the things that you want to do as you get older. So that's really where I start. It does not, everybody's like, where's my bicep curls and where's my overhead? Like, where's my tricep extension? You'll get those in the rows and in the chest presses. You'll still work your biceps, you'll work your triceps. These moves are, again, they're compound, lots of muscle groups involved, multiple joints involved. So you're going to get the most return on your investment from 5 exercises. It's just 5. It's not a lot, but that would be where I would suggest anybody start. And again, say you don't have equipment, say you just want to start doing something. All right. If you've got a body and you can count, you can still do something, right?
I love that.
So squats, lunges, push-ups. There you go. 3 exercises. So if you have nothing at home, you can still squat. You can most certainly do a lunge and you can do a push-up, and you can do the push-up on your knees or your toes. You can do it on a wall. So this does not have to be complicated. We got to meet you where you're at, wherever your level of strength is. It doesn't matter. There's always room to improve, and it doesn't matter what you have or don't have at home. So that's where I would start.
I love when you break it down into the functional activity, because I think people don't think of it like that. Just to your point, they think of the Gold's Gym and they think about the really, strong man doing all these presses or whatever. But like the first time that I heard somebody talk about a squat as a sit and stand thing, like just literally sit and stand multiple times a day and you're doing some squats. And I was like, wow. That's true. Like it's the same muscles. It's the same activity. And I never, ever had I thought of it like that. And when you just said the push-up, in my mind, I'll go immediately to, I can't do a push-up, but I know I can do the wall push, like use your body weight to push against the wall. Sure, it's not the same thing, but you're using some of those same muscles. So I love when you break it down to the functional activity, because I think it really helps people see that, yeah, I can do this. You can reach for something in your cupboard 5 times, 10 times, or whatever, when you stand it in your kitchen. Those things are easy to do. Yeah. Fit them in.
And it doesn't have to, exactly. It doesn't have to be like a boxed 35-minute workout at the gym where you have to travel somewhere. It can be in short, they call them movement snacks. I mean, it can be short bursts, like while you're waiting for your coffee to warm up or whatever. You can do 10 air squats or 5 air squats. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be while you're brushing your teeth. You could do some lunges or whatever. It doesn't have to be fancy. We're just trying to incorporate more movement here. And what you'll notice is the more you do it, the easier it gets.
Yeah.
And then you can advance from there. So it does not have to be complicated at all. In fact, it shouldn't be complicated, because the more complicated it is, the less likely you're going to be to do it.
Yes. I love that. And I think you probably just hit on it, but I was going to ask you, what's your advice for people that aren't quote unquote motivated to do it? So they're not motivated to go to the gym, or they're not motivated to take an hour of exercise. Yeah. What would you say to that?
Well, knowing what I know about our brain. So remember what our brain is. So our brain is lazy and it's stubborn and it wants what it wants, and it wants it right now. So it's all about the instant gratification. So many people will tell me they want to exercise because they want to be healthy and make it to 85 so they can kick it with their grandkids or whatever. And all of those things are great, but they're not something that you can see and measure right here and right now. And so your brain is going to be like, you can get healthy tomorrow.
Yes.
You can work on chasing and keeping up with your grandkids tomorrow. Yeah. And so then it's another skipped workout. So instead, I will work very, very hard with my client to identify, what is it that you're going to get out of this workout today that's going to move you to go do it? So your brain needs instant gratification, or else it's going to say, no, thank you.
I love that.
So we have to find what that is. And it's going to be different for every single person. So for me, I love exercise and I love the feeling that I get when I'm done. I use swimming as an example all the time because it's my least favorite of the activities, but I do it because I'm chasing the progress. I want to see my kids are 10 and 11 and they're faster than me. And it's really annoying and humbling. But if I want to keep up, I got to keep going. And so I envision that. I chase that progress. And so every time I show up and I'm like, oh man, that water's cold. I don't really want to do this. I think of that and then I get in and just get it done. So whatever it is, we need to find what your instant gratification is going to be, whether it's I did that, I feel awesome, I feel so much better now, my day is set because I got it done before the crack of dawn. Whatever it is, we have to find that instant gratification and make everything possible happen for you to get it in.
I love that.
That would be my approach.
As we start trying to wrap up, I'd love to know, what was the best piece of advice you ever got around health and wellness?
Man, that's a good one. I don't know that I've ever been asked that before. Oh my goodness. I mean, I think I've said it already a couple of times, and I'll say it again here, is that you can't beat yourself up into better. And I think for any of the overachievers out there listening,
all
who have taken that approach, I think that's it. Because here's the thing, the overachieving will get you far in your career and in your accolades, right?
Yeah.
And often we're rewarded for that. But when we're talking about your body and mind and soul, overachieving doesn't cut it. And in fact, it pushes us to burnout. So treating ourselves in the same way that we treated ourselves to get the A's and get into grad school and get the titles after our name and such, it's not the same as taking care of our body and our soul. And I really had to unlearn that. I still am, to be perfectly honest. We're all still on a trajectory, and I am certainly not done with mine. But that would be probably the biggest and hardest lesson that I've had to learn. But it's been worth it. It's been worth it to actually practice being nicer to myself, as weird and as foreign as that may seem sometimes. Yeah. And I think it's foreign for many women. Yes. Honestly, I think it's foreign. And it just feels weird and icky because we think we're going soft or giving ourselves the easy way out. But that's not it at all. Because I would say that I'm more self-compassionate now, but I also hold myself to a high standard. And sometimes one of the most self-compassionate things you can do is offer yourself some tough love, meaning there are things that we don't want to do, but we do them anyway because we know we made that plan and we're going to hold ourselves to it and we're going to hold up to our own word. So I guess that was kind of a long-winded answer, but that would be one of the biggest lessons. The overachieving and pushing harder works for some things, but again, not for the things that are inside us, for sure.
I really love the way you talked about having self-compassion and having room to still hold yourself accountable and have a high standard, because they can go together. There's room for both. It starts to shift. And you use the word so many times in our conversation, the word unlearn. And it's something I say all the time, because I think especially in this middle-age phase, especially when we start to recognize that we want a different type of life and we start trying to curate that type of life, there really is so much unlearning that goes into it. But that's where the magic starts to happen, when we start to have that, moment of being able to kind of see through all the old stories and get to the new ones. It's been a great conversation. Yeah. I appreciate you sharing all of your journey and such great practical tips for people. That's one of my things I love to leave with people, and you do a great job with that. So thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate it. It's been really great. Thank you.
I'm going to put all the links to you and the work in the show notes, but if you had to pick one, where is the place you're most active that you would send people in case they don't look it up? What would we say? What do we tell them?
Yeah. Honestly, my podcast, because I put it out, I do it myself every week. And that is where I share the most information about eating, moving, and thinking. I'm certainly on social, but the podcast is really where I put out my most valuable content. It's all there.
As a reminder, guys, the podcast is called Strong is a Mindset. Check that out, you guys. I know I've listened to many episodes and you do offer practical tips all the time. And I think really people can really get a lot out of it. So thank you for sharing that with us and all the work you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks again for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review, as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.